Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business Live. Looking forward to talking with Anthony Milewski. Anthony, it's great to connect with you, co-founder of the Oregon Group. We're going to talk a lot about today about what you do and helping people understand the world of commodities and energy, and we'll kind of get into that. As a business owner today, one of the things I love to start off with, I'm a business coach. I work with people and companies all over the globe who are stuck. I get them unstuck. I always like to really kind of dive into a little bit on, as a business owner, where has been a recent stuck of yours and how have you gotten through that?
I think, let me think about that for a second. What has been a recent stuck? I think one of the challenges that we sort of have faced is as we've emerged from COVID, where everyone was working from home and off their laptop. There was just this big disconnect inside of teams. People hadn't seen each other for a long time, but you're still having this resistance to going back into the office in any meaningful way. And so it's figuring out how to, one, get people convinced that they actually want to be in the office in order to create community and teams, right? Because, it's an important part of life. It's an important part of personal and professional life. Are building networks, teams, friendships. And, it's just been kind of navigating that and figuring out where do you draw the line in terms of making people spend X amount of time in the office? How do you facilitate these relationships, which I think it's contrary to human evolution and just people in general to never meet and be together face to face. It's kind of navigating that in a way that I never really dreamed would have to deal with.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think everybody comes to work wanting to do a good job. But everybody, I agree with you. But I'm seeing a lot of that too. People want to feel connected, but there is this kind of resistance. But one thing that I'm seeing where that people are enjoying coming back to the office is it adds more routine and structure into their day. And the more you can kind of, build around some routines and structure and training them about routine and structure, it goes a long way, because I think those are things that they can't define, but that's what they're craving. That's what they're craving.
The other thing I feel this very strongly. If you're like under 30, you haven't developed your professional networks yet, and you never know what leads to what, right? And there's just tremendous value in being there and bumping into Cindy or Tommy on the way, who's your 3 times up boss, and realizing that you both have a passion for Etruscan art, and finding a mentor in this world. And I think that's an intangible that I experienced, and that I think a lot of more senior people have experienced, but it's sort of lost on someone who's never experienced it. And I think for younger listeners, I would say, and also for managers who are thinking about ways to help some of their people like sub 25, sub 30 is, really kind of selling this notion that, you might not be at this company forever, but you're going to have all these relationships, and they're going to have their relationships, and they're going to become the boss someday. And I think people are losing that, especially young people who didn't have the pre-COVID thing going on.
I agree with you, Anthony. I out of college started in an internet business, and then after I sold that, I was in commercial real estate. And in commercial real estate, I learned in a pit, and an office setting is, to me, where you accelerate your growth and you're learning the most. And I agree with all the reasons you're talking about. All right. Thanks for that. All right. Let's dive into you. So you, you're training people on commodities and energy. And, for the person who's listening on a kindergarten level, what does that mean?
Yeah. So I've spent my career as, portfolio manager at a private equity firm. I ran the global business development there. And then later, the last 7 or 8 years as an executive at a company I founded, a couple of different companies we founded, all in the commodity space. And what I realized was that people don't understand that if you look around the room you're in right now, wherever you are, the car, wherever you look around your room, and almost everything you see is either mined or grown. And so the most basic element of everything are these materials, and no one knows anything about them. And they really represent and present a very interesting opportunity for investment, whether it's because you think that, in my case, I think that we're transitioning to a cleaner, greener source of energy that's going to require copper and nickel, cobalt, whether you think that the war in Ukraine is going to require more cobalt for jet engines, or microchips are going to require more tin for solder, like whatever you kind of have as an investment thesis, at the core of that thesis is probably a basic material. And so, in addition to the companies that I'm involved in, whether that's as the chairman or an executive, we started something called the Oregon Group to help kind of educate people about the commodities space and help them understand how important and fundamental it is to everything.
Yeah. And so somebody who is new to it, who can't really, when you talk about investing in it, right? If I want to invest in Pepsi or Coke, it's kind of an easy, sell. But how does somebody go about it? And then how do they get comfortable with it for the long term?
Okay, so just like anything, I mean, commodities is a huge space. But let's say you liked gold. You thought that there were problems with the dollar and inflation. Let's just pretend you had this thesis around it. There would be kind of more than three, but three really obvious, easy ways to do it. For, let's say, you could go and buy physical gold bars, which I don't like that idea. Transaction costs, risk of theft, it's not for me. You could go and buy an ETF, a low cost ETF. Not a bad way to play. You don't have a lot of leverage, but not a bad way to play. Very directional. My favorite way, I actually personally do this for gold, is you can go buy an ETF, GDXJ and GDX. Those ETFs give you exposure to large cap gold producers or smaller cap gold producers. They're highly liquid, and you can buy and sell them, and you have big torque. So, gold moves a little bit up or down. This moves a lot up or down. And then, I think the final way would be to pick specific gold producer names. So a company that is out gold mining, and that requires, I think, more expertise, because you're taking a single company risk. But that kind of expression of optionality is probably true for most big commodities. You could do the exact same thing for copper. Probably not going to store copper at your house because it's not as value intensive, but you could have that same basic strategy. And I think it's getting people to think about it. And, especially, let's say, for instance, you think we're going to use coal less and that we're going to have more nuclear reactors. Well, guess what? Uranium is a really interesting way to invest. If you think that electric vehicles, everyone's going to own one, well, guess what? Each one of those vehicles is powered by a nickel, lithium, cobalt battery. So, so it's kind of, one derivative off from the thing, and it's another way to think about the world and invest.
Yeah. Let's talk about, as you talk about another way, I want to talk about how another technology is also shaping things. And so, when you look at AI, how is that going to shape how, anything in your world when it comes to mining opportunities, assessing, situations and things of that nature?
So there was actually an article in the Wall Street Journal within the last 3 days about this, because there's been a company that's been really successful. I think Bill Gates is one of the big investors in it. And so in particular, when you're searching for an ore body that may or may not become a mine someday, you're drilling holes in the ground and you can't see anything other than this little kind of round hole that goes, half mile into the ground. And so I think AI will play a huge component in, or a huge part in helping with the discovery of new ore bodies. Now, of course, they have to have the data first, and I don't think that data is standardized or collated. And then I think also it will help, mines run more efficiently. So there's no question that over time, AI will play a major role. Now, the flip side of that is AI takes computation power. And so that means you're going to sell a lot more chips. And I think that that's really positive for tin, actually, because tin is like a solder used in them. And there'd be some other ones too, but tin is there's lots of ways you could play tin if you wanted to invest in it.
Yeah, I love it. So now let me ask you this. So as chairman of Nickel 28 and co-founder of the Oregon Group, how do they work together?
Well, they're completely separate in the sense that they're not, Nickel 28, we are the second largest producer of MHP in the world. So MHP is, if you think about it, it's nickel, but it's not metal. It's kind of like crushed wet rock in bags. and it's in a form that is sold to battery makers by and large. A lot of our product ends up as a battery in a car ultimately. Um, so that's just a regular operating business that has massive torque to the electric vehicle story. Uh, the Organ Group, on the other hand, is really a venue. You can go to theorgangroup.com to talk about these commodities. And so it's sharing our views about different commodities and different geopolitical events that kind of relate to different commodities. So they're sort of related in that one shakes the other one's hand, but at the same time they're completely different.
Yeah, good. Let's zoom out for a minute and talk about, in your career, you've raised over $1 billion for various companies. As we sit here today, in June, mid 2023, when the world looking forward into the next decade is going to be a lot of innovation, a lot of AI, a lot of VR. What when a company raises money, is looking to raise money today and in the future, what are investors looking at today?
Yeah, I actually think that I think the market is at a really tricky spot right now because if you look at pre-GFC global financial crisis, what you had were a lot of investors who could invest in ideas with a longer duration, right? Like they could take a multi-year view. Now, what you have is a market where investors tell you they have multi-year views, but in fact, they're paid mark to market annually with a high water mark. And so it's very challenging because there are almost no outside of the VC world, which is its own kind of sub world for specifically and primarily for tech. There's really no one taking a 10-year view, maybe a family office.
Right.
So they'll sell you on a notion that they are. Um, but at the end of the day, I think it's not true. And I think it's a very challenging fact for people because in particular, if you're traded publicly, what you have is a scenario where you have a story. You're capturing AI right now. Maybe you're talking about Cybacillin was the flavor of the month a year or two ago. You're talking about electric vehicles. So you have this story and then you have faster money chasing it, but that money will leave that sector and space as quickly as it goes out. Notwithstanding that, if your objective, of course, is to raise money, I mean, chasing those thematics is probably the best way. If you want to raise longer term capital, family offices is potentially one of the fewer ways because private equity, of course, controls your business. Once you take private equity money, you're no longer really running that business. And the VC world is kind of its own world unto the rest, right?
Yeah, it seems to me like, there's going to be so many businesses that are going to come, be sold. It seems to me like, people are looking for shorter term. I remember when I started my internet company, when I was out of college, I was 23 and we sold it when I was 25. And it just feels like the world is moving that fast over the next couple of years. I'm excited to see.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because in the tech space, for AI, I've invested in a bunch of these names. I mean, there is liquidity. You can get money, but if you want to go raise money for a natural resource story right now, it is very challenging. And the other interesting thing about natural resources is each time you shovel one shovel of dirt out of the ground, 1 pound of iron ore, copper ore, whatever that's gone. It's used.
Yeah.
So you have to constantly be, adding on the back end, or you eventually run out. And I think what we're seeing now is almost a decade with very little build out in terms of new capacity across a bunch of commodities, and very little money is going into it right now, which kind of sets the stage at some point over the next 5 or 7 years for some big moves.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what those are. All right, quick speed round, Anthony. Book that's had the biggest impact on you?
On the Road by Jack Kerouac.
Okay, good one. Best piece of wisdom you've ever received?
Make sure to work out every day.
Okay. Finish this sentence. If you don't work out every day, what do you do on your off day?
Ski.
Okay. All right, good. Tell everybody, Anthony, who your ideal clients are for both companies and how they can connect with you.
My ideal clients are people who are open-minded and interested in learning more. And if you want to connect with me, the best way maybe is just through Twitter. You can DM me.
Okay. And give him your all your info.
Yeah, it's A_Milewski at Twitter, or just Anthony Milewski. You can look me up. You'll see me there.
Good. Well, Anthony, I appreciate you taking time to be on the show. It's always good to talk to business owners like yourself. I appreciate you giving insight on everything, but also just how you have a business that helps educate people and make people smarter, and something that maybe is simple to you, but not simple to others. And it takes a lot of education. So I appreciate that. Think community, if you want to learn more about Anthony, reach out to him. If you want to reach out to me, reach out at jondwoskin.com. Anthony, thanks a lot. That was great.
Thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate it.